What if the greatest act of goodness made people want to destroy you? What if undeniable truth didn't bring unity, but division? And what if the more clearly something is revealed, the more strongly it is resisted? Right after the miracle that should have changed everything, something unexpected happens. Lazarus has just walked out of a tomb. A man dead for 4 days is alive again. There is no confusion, no trick, no illusion. People saw it. They witnessed it with their own eyes, and yet, not everyone responds the same way. Some believe, but others go and report it. Not to celebrate, not to understand, but to the religious leaders. And that's where the tone of the story shifts, from wonder to strategy, from awe to opposition. The chief priests and the Pharisees call a meeting. It's not a discussion filled with curiosity or humility. It's not a search for truth. It's a council, a calculated gathering. What are we accomplishing, they ask. Here is this man performing many signs. Notice that. They don't deny the signs. They don't question the reality of what happened. They acknowledge it, clearly, directly. This man is performing many signs. The evidence is not the problem. The issue is what it means. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, they continue. And right there, the real concern is revealed. Not truth, not righteousness. Not even whether what Jesus is doing is from God. Their concern is influence, control. What will happen if people start following him? What will happen to their authority, their position, their system? And then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Fear enters the room. Not just personal fear, political fear, cultural fear. The fear of losing everything they've built. And fear, when left unchecked, often leads to decisions that seem justified in the moment, but are deeply wrong. One man steps forward, Caiaphas, the high priest. He speaks with confidence, almost dismissively. You know nothing at all, he says. It's not an invitation to discuss, it's a declaration. He presents what he believes is a solution. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. It sounds logical, strategic, even reasonable. Sacrifice one to protect many. But beneath that logic is something darker, a willingness to destroy innocence, to preserve control. And here's the twist. What Caiaphas says carries more truth than he realizes. Because while he speaks politically, something deeper is happening. The idea that one man would die for the people is not just strategy, it's prophecy. But not in the way he intends, because his plan is rooted in fear. But the reality that will unfold is rooted in purpose. He thinks he is protecting the nation, but he is unknowingly speaking into something far greater. That one man will indeed die. Not to preserve a system, but to redeem lives. Not out of fear, but out of love. And from that day on, they begin to plot. Not debate, not question, plot. The decision is made, not because they lacked evidence, but because they rejected it. And this is where the story becomes deeply uncomfortable. Because it reveals something that still exists today. The ability to see truth and still choose against it. The ability to recognize something good and still oppose it. Why? Because truth, when it threatens control, is often resisted. Jesus withdraws from public view, not out of fear, but because the time is not yet. He moves to a place near the wilderness, staying with his disciples, and there's a shift from public confrontation to quiet preparation. But the tension doesn't disappear. The Passover is approaching, a time of gathering, a time of expectation. People begin to ask questions. Will he come? They're watching, waiting, wondering. The atmosphere is filled with anticipation, but also danger, because orders have been given. Anyone who finds him must report it, so that he can be arrested. The stage is set, not just for conflict, but for something much bigger. And here's what makes this moment so powerful. The same miracle that led some to believe, led others to plan destruction. Same event, same evidence, completely different responses. And that raises a question. What determines how someone responds to truth? Because it's not always about what is seen. It's about what is valued. The leaders valued control, stability, power, and anything that threatened that became a problem. Even if it was good, even if it was true, even if it came from God. And that's a dangerous place to be. Because when protecting your position becomes more important than pursuing truth, you lose the ability to recognize what matters most. Caiaphas thought he was being wise, strategic, protective, but in reality, he was participating in something he didn't fully understand. And that's often how it happens. Decisions made out of fear can feel justified, but they lead to consequences far beyond what we expect. The leaders didn't see themselves as villains. They saw themselves as guardians, protectors, doing what was necessary. And that's what makes this story so real, because rarely do people think they are choosing wrong. They believe they are doing what's right, based on what they value. And that's why the question becomes personal. What do you value most? Because your values shape your response to truth, to change, to challenge. If your priority is comfort, you will resist anything that disrupts it. If your priority is control, you will oppose anything you can't manage. If your priority is image, you will avoid anything that exposes reality. But if your priority is truth, you will be willing to adjust, to rethink, to surrender, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs something. The people who believed after Lazarus was raised, they weren't smarter, they weren't more informed. They were simply open to seeing, open to responding, open to changing. And that made all the difference. The leaders, on the other hand, were closed. Not because they didn't understand, but because they didn't want to. And that's the core of this passage. Not ignorance, but resistance. Not confusion, but rejection. And it's a reminder that truth alone doesn't change people. Response does. You can see something clearly and still walk away. You can recognize something powerful and still choose against it. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about what you see. It's about what you're willing to accept. The plot against Jesus didn't begin in darkness. It began in the presence of light, in the face of undeniable evidence. And that's what makes it so striking. Because it shows that the greatest opposition doesn't always come from ignorance. Sometimes it comes from those who know but refuse. And that's the warning. Because it's easy to think, I would never respond like that. But the truth is, whenever we choose comfort over truth, whenever we protect our position instead of pursuing what's right, whenever we resist change because it threatens us, we step into the same pattern. And that's why this story matters, not just as history, but as reflection. Because it asks a simple but powerful question. When truth stands in front of you, what will you do? Will you follow it, or will you fight it? Because the answer to that question shapes everything that comes next. Thank you for watching this video. If this message spoke to you, don't forget to like, follow the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today.